Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to share with you all about April 2023. It's an incredibly powerful month. We have the first solar eclipse of the year. We also have a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter, one of the luckiest connections you can get in astrology. But Mercury goes into the second of its earthy retrogrades this year, this time in the sign of Taurus. But what about the pre-retrograde shadow period? What can we expect from that? And also, because Saturn and Pluto have recently relocated into new homes, the influences that they're going to trigger this month are very different to what they've been influencing over recent years. So there's a big shift. We've also got Chiron, the wounded healer, very much involved with the full moon of the 6th. So please stay with me for all of this. Also, you can go on to watch your deep dive video for each of the 12 zodiac signs. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new here, it's great to have you with us. I'd be honoured if you'd subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. This is very much a community, so do share any thoughts you've got. I do interact with each one, and please do also like the video too. Now, if you would like to guide your life with a greater awareness of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you your life roadmap report. This will help you to understand the patterns that have developed in your journey so far, but help you to get a much more intimate understanding of the challenges, but to seize the opportunities more firmly. And also, in my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month personal forecast, totally unique to you, and this will give you searing insights into the months ahead. Now, if you don't know your time of birth, I've developed a new product which is a solar horoscope that doesn't use the ascendant. We have to assume the moon at midday, but this works very much in tandem with my YouTube videos. So if you don't know your time of birth, you can still enjoy that special package with 30% off. Please see the link beneath this video. So as April begins, it's very much Aries season still, with the Sun in the first zodiac sign of its journey, very much about initiation, getting on the front foot, being dynamic, living in the moment, injecting ongoing strands that are important to us with greater verve, but also getting new schemes off the ground. Initially, Mercury is also in Aries, but critically Jupiter, as I mentioned before. Now, from the 6th through to the 11th, the Sun creeps ever closer to Jupiter before they come into an exact alliance on that day. That could potentially be very exciting, particularly if you're a fire or an air sign, because also on the 11th, Venus is going to be moving into Gemini, where it can be a very charismatic influence. But right at the start of this month, Venus is still interacting with Uranus, the planet of change, the planet of rebellion, the planet of higher truths. And there could be some tensions around some relationships at the start of this month, perhaps around different value systems or a different approach to the use of money in a partnership. But also Venus combining with Uranus can push us to try to change things up a little bit, be more open-minded in our approach to resources, but also in how we connect to others. If you're lucky, there could also be a rather sultry connection to someone right at the start of this month too. But on the 3rd, Mercury makes its way out of Aries and into the sign of Taurus. Mercury in Taurus is very good for grappling with those resources that Venus and Uranus are asking us to look at in a different way. But Mercury is immediately checked by that very potent energy of Pluto, newly arrived in the sign of Aquarius. So if we do see an issue through a different lens when it comes to our world view or around a financial issue, it really could be revealed across those few days. Mercury squaring Pluto can see people be very strident. We live in a world that's very much about polarization between different viewpoints. Things are painted in very black and white terms. The nuances can be crushed somewhat. So if something does seem a bit askew at this part of the month, don't rush to judgment. Try to get as much information as possible and grapple with the detail of things, Mercury's rulership of Virgo, and just stay open-minded while you just download any sources of information so you can really get abreast of what a situation might be about. But the first week also sees a very significant angle between Mars and Saturn. Now, of course, Mars went through that extended journey through Gemini, and it was challenged in lots of ways, not least by its retrograde, pre-retrograde, post-retrograde shadows, but also its square to Neptune. But this is interesting. Mars in the sign of Cancer is not its best location, and Saturn in Pisces, not its best location either. But the thrust of Mars is balanced, is anchored appropriately in the water sign of the fishes by Saturn. So if there's something that we're wanting to flex around, which is to do with the structure of our lives, even where we live, or about a family or emotional matter, something substantive can build up. But of course, the full moon, which occurs on the 6th, is that annual full moon. I should say that on the west coast of America, it occurs on the 5th. But this is the annual full moon, the Libran full moon, the pink moon, which is very much about how we relate. And this does have Chiron very close to the sun. And Jupiter's not too far off either. The sun is heading towards Jupiter, remember, by the 11th. And I feel that this full moon actually gives us a real opportunity. When we think about relationships, we can be very focused on what we're not getting, especially if we're single. But if you're single and you're not in a relationship, even if that may at times seem very lonesome, at least you're not in a tie which is inhibiting you in a negative way. So immediately we found a positive. Also, I feel that when we are in a relationship, it's possible to focus on the things that aren't working so well and forget about the things that we share in common. So I think that this is a full moon, particularly with the healing vibe of Chiron and Jupiter, to really remember the things that we're lucky enough to have. So whether that's good friendships, good neighbours, associations with people in our community, or a good relationship with ourselves. If we've got a healthy understanding of our boundaries, it may be that you're hanging out for someone who's really worthy of you. And that's one of the most glorious places to be, because eventually it will bring a reward. But this particular full moon does see a quincunx with Uranus. So just be aware that the financial implications around a relationship, or where people's values are a little bit different, may be something that does need to be discussed. But I think for me, the Libran full moon is finding the midpoint between making sure that we're aware and tuned into the needs of others, but we don't give away our individuality to the point that we become invisible in being a people pleaser. So it's just a nice point in the middle, a sweet spot that this particular event is asking us to achieve in the following 2 weeks. But it's really interesting because on the 7th, Mercury starts to slow down in its pre-retrograde shadow. And Mercury in the sign of Taurus, as I mentioned before, is a very good placement because it's very realistic. And of course, its rulership of Virgo is very realistic too. So I just feel that if we're buying anything, and obviously Mercury does influence the digital sphere, to be very precise and understand exactly what we may be contemplating, but don't see the pre-retrograde shadow or the retrograde itself, which begins on the 21st, as an innately bad thing. Quite a few people write to me on YouTube and say, shall I put off buying this property? Shall I put off going for this job or buying this mode of transport? I think the thing to remember with Mercury is it can be a time when it's in shadow or retrograde when things are frustrating and can create glitches, but it can create solutions, and it gives us a chance to revisit something that didn't work the first time round. So we just need to be nimble and fluid, which is Mercury's more Gemini energy. Just keep looking at things in different ways. Don't take a stuck position. And in the sign of Taurus, there is a little bit of a chance that can happen, because of course it appreciates stability. But by the 11th, the Sun has closed up and met Jupiter exactly. Now, as I explain in each of the deep dives for each of the 12 zodiac signs, this will vary for each of your signs, but for us all, this could give us some extra physical vitality. And there has been a lot of drained energy around. I feel that Neptune's a very underestimated influence. We've also had the buffeting of Mars in a quincunx with Pluto, which has been very complex. And just what's going on in the world in general, you know, just the increase in prices and costs and interest rates, property rentals or mortgages have all had a profound, along with energy prices, profound impact on a lot of citizens. And also, of course, we see a lot of misery in the world. We've seen a lot of civil unrest, whether it's Israel or France or Great Britain, or what's going on in the Ukraine. So a lot of complex worldly energies, and it's very difficult to be completely unaware of them. Even if you try to cut yourself off from the news a little bit to protect yourself, somehow or another this information can seep through. So I feel that it's a chance for us to have some uplift. Jupiter is very fortifying, it's very optimistic, it's giving us encouragement, and it's asking us all to be a little bit more risk-taking in the fire sign with the Sun in Aries. But also on the 11th, Venus glides into the sign of Gemini, as I mentioned earlier. Now this is interesting because Venus then goes on to be in a bit of a dust-up with Saturn for the following week. So this is where we're seeing, first of all, we saw it with Mercury's square with Pluto. Now we're seeing the New World Order, if you like, with Saturn squaring up with Venus. So if there is a weak relationship in your situation, and perhaps one of the partners feels that the other is rather superficial, I feel that this aspect will certainly test a relationship like that. So for example, if you had a very intense connection to someone at the start of the month because of Venus's conjunction to Uranus, which is very sensual, but not necessarily a great influence for longevity, it certainly will be tested if you met someone in this first part of the month by Venus's square to Saturn. But of course Venus also governs money. And in the sign of Gemini, I would say that we need to be conscious of the cost of, say, insurance premiums on transport or vehicle, or the cost of travel. It may be that some perks and privileges that have gone with travel in the past will become much less in vogue due to environmental concerns. So for example, you can get these cheap city flights, buzzing backwards and forwards. There could be a levy that could be applied through this particular influence, because I feel that Saturn will have a great deal to say about the environmental sphere over the next 2 years. But of course Venus in the sign of Gemini is brilliant for reading, being sociable, mixing and mingling. But I just feel that just be conscious of what your motives are, or the motives of anyone that you encounter, because Saturn could, in the sign of Pisces, keep something hidden. So for example, if there's someone you meet that really gets you very switched on and is very good company, Is there something about them that they're not revealing that may actually be more ultimately challenging? But the real paradox here is that Venus actually forges a beautiful link to Pluto on the same day. So Saturn challenges Venus and Pluto enables Venus. So what Pluto does is, where you have any kind of relationship with someone that is dignified, is fair, there is sincerity on both sides, this could be something that you could really get an evocative feel for right at this point of the month. So very interesting, with the Sun being in conjunction with Jupiter, which essentially is very lucky. So some people will be very focused on that potential, and Venus is trying with Pluto very much gives us a sense of the depth of connections, but there is that challenge by Saturn. So what's Saturn about? Saturn is about limitations. Is there going to be someone you really like, but they're not available? They're locked into a situation and they can't escape from. Perhaps it's a location different to yours. Perhaps it is a loveless relationship that they feel unable to leave. And that's how this could all knit together. Also, the Sun in a conjunction with Jupiter can be about the way we want to approach a business idea, be more entrepreneurial. And of course, Saturn's very much about structures. So even if someone talks a good case and is very compelling, it may be, for example, about a get-rich-quick scheme, or something seems like the next big thing, Saturn's just asking you to do a deep dive to see what's out of sight, the 12th house, what's not visible. So it doesn't mean to say it can't work, just do your due diligence very carefully. Now, the 16th to the 24th could be potentially really exciting, because although Mercury is slowing down ready for its retrograde, it forges an exact conjunction with Uranus. So if ever there was a time to be futuristic around our thinking, around our resources, Mercury is exalted in the second decan, well, Mercury, I beg your pardon, governs the second decan of Aquarius, but is exalted in Aquarius, which of course is co-ruled by Uranus. So modern astrology reflects Aquarius through the energy of both Saturn, its traditional ruler, and the duality of Uranus, its very progressive, dynamic, modern ruler. So I would say that if you can think outside the box, the 16th to the 24th could be extraordinarily exciting if you are someone who's very attuned to trends, fashion, music, or technology, but you see an opportunity to provide a service which is, very realistic. Taurus, it has a tangible way of making a return, again Taurus, but brings in that energy of Uranus to flex and find new ways to approach things. Now, the 20th sees that solar eclipse in Aries. This is the second new moon of the month in this sign, because of course we had one that occurred on the 21st of March. And this one is therefore right at the end of the sign of Aries. It's on the anaretic degree. So it's squaring up with Pluto. It's still in touch with Jupiter broadly. So this is really, really interesting. When people have Jupiter square Pluto in a situation, especially in transiting astrology or an opposition, their desire for greater recognition and power is quite compelling, potentially to do with money, because of course Jupiter can be about trade, international business, expansion, and Pluto about the desire. But what Pluto in Aquarius is asking us all to do is to be much more mindful of whatever we do in terms of its impact on others. So I think we need to think about this solar eclipse really in simple terms as being more of a Taurus solar eclipse. So first against 10th. So Pluto for Taurus, 10th house, how we connect to the world. If we think of Aries, it's very much about the first house, how we want to be as an individual, connecting to Pluto, which is right at the start of Aquarius in house 11. But really, it's just beyond house 10. So a little bit complex, but what I would boil this down to is this. The Aries energy, which can cascade over the next 6 months, is going to be augmented by the arrival on the 13th of July of the North Node, which is going to be a real good thing. The new moon, which occurred in Aries on the 21st of March, squared up to the ruler of Aries, Mars. So that gave us an impetus to get going and be more dynamic. But I think what it's saying is the downside of Aries energy is that perhaps we can go into things without considering the big picture quite so much, but that's sometimes a really good thing. If we had the benefit of hindsight after we go through something quite challenging, we might decide that we would never have done it. But actually, with the fullness of time, we can see that that life experience has been very enriching. So because Pluto is pushing us all collectively to find new ways of working together, we can see it in that sense, but we have to balance the individuality of Aries with the collective of Pluto. Or we can think of resources through Taurus and the worldly impact of Pluto. So I feel artificial intelligence has been a big theme recently, and it is something that I've spoken about in my analysis of Pluto in Aquarius, of how it can definitely be a threat because people need to work. I'm totally against driverless lorries, driverless trains. This kind of technology is going to strip out so many people from working, and work gives us a sense of identity, a sense of contributing something. It doesn't mean that we should necessarily spend all our time working. You know, if you're a real enthusiast, your work could be very important to you. And it's no bad thing that Pluto may give us opportunities to develop as human beings in different ways. But I feel that whole debate about AI will really explode even more on the back of this solar eclipse. So we can initiate things on the back of this, but we need to be conscious that with Pluto in the mix, we may have a lot of desire to achieve something, but whether it's good for us or not, as a collective or as individuals, is another matter. But the 20th then quickly sees the Sun switch into the sign of Taurus, joining up with Mercury, and of course joining up with Uranus too. But on the 21st, Mercury goes into that retrograde. It will emerge from it on the 15th of May, but it won't emerge from the post-retrograde shadow until the end of May. So I think when it comes to the whole complex interplay and relationship of the way finances are managed around the globe now, it's very much more complex than ever it used to be. So the chances are we could see some slowing down of growth even more, some fearful trends, but I still feel that there is the potential for things to improve as this year goes on, more than people originally thought. The big tremor that's gone through the first 3 or 4 months of 2023 really was instigated by the lunar eclipse of the 8th of November last year. And we're still feeling that energy of turbulence, of a lot of worker dissatisfaction. There's a lot of issues to do with pensions, at what age people will retire and so forth. So the need for a recognition of a fairness against the more financial reality of the world as it's become is something that is going to continue to be a theme, I feel. But hopefully we will see some inflation start to come down. But I think in our personal situations, we do need to manage our resources still in a very careful, even thrifty way. But the end of this month does see again some very dynamic influences that we haven't seen in recent years, not least that the Sun in the sign of Taurus links brilliantly with Saturn in Pisces. Now, water and earth actually go together really well. If you think of a riverbed, when there is no water, when we see periods of a lack of rain, you have the shape of the riverbed, and that's earth, but it carries the water. So the Sun in Taurus is asking us to be pragmatic, grounded, look for solutions that give us a sense of tangible reward, make sure that we're working on our sense of self and our own value, not just being focused on the material world, enjoying anything where we can recycle, or if you're a maker, Taurus is wonderful for anything to do with crafting, pottery, obviously music because of the sensuality of Venus. If you're a singer, for example, your larynx, people who are Taurans or have a lot of second house, perhaps second house Mercury or Venus, obviously have quite often have a wonderful tonal quality to the way they express their ideas. So the Sun is supported by Saturn. The Sun is saying stay in touch with the feeling dimension that Saturn's promoting, but also Mars, strutting its stuff in Cancer, is forging a great link to Uranus. So we've got another Earth-Water link. So this is asking us to stay attuned to our feelings, but also be very realistic about resources. Don't spend all of our time totally focused on the material world. Consumption has its place. It can obviously be great fun if we have a really nice meal or a nice piece of clothing or furniture or a nice, peaceful, safe, secure home to live in. All of those things are completely laudable and totally understandable. The problem we have is the type of things that we consume at the speed we consume and the way things are made with a very short shelf life, because marketers want us to repeat that purchase as soon as possible in order to make more profit. So if our only focus in life is on how things seem, the more material plane, we're going to miss out. So this Mercury retrograde knitting in with this energy in the Sun and Uranus towards the end of the month, with the more emotional energy of Mars in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces, is asking us to evolve as a species. And if we don't, things are going to continue to be challenging for us. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Please see the links beneath this video for your in-depth zodiac sign forecast for the month of April. But also there is a deep dive for the full moon on the 6th. Thank you so much. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.